Vanished in the Islands. The Disappearance of Faloma and Maleina Luhk. Welcome back to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Today's case doesn't come from the snowy backroads of northern Ontario or the gritty laneways of downtown Toronto. The story begins far from Canada, on a quiet tropical island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But make no mistake, it's one of the most haunting disappearances we've ever covered. Two young sisters. A warm, peaceful morning. A roadside bus stop only steps from home. They were seen waiting, and then they were gone. No struggle, no witnesses, no sign of where they went. What followed was the largest, most expensive missing persons investigation in the history of the Northern Mariana Islands. The FBI flew in, federal agents, helicopters, divers, tracking dogs. Even a landfill was torn apart piece by piece. Suspects came and went. Dark secrets surfaced. But the two girls never did. More than a decade later, this case remains open, and the question remains as chilling as ever. What happened to Faloma and Maleina Luhk? I'm your host, Jay Nickel, and this is Ontario Cold Cases. Vanished in the Islands. The Disappearance of Faloma and Maleina Luhk. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel, Nickel Investigations. This is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Ontario Cold Cases is a gripping true crime podcast that shines a light on unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from across the province and the world. With meticulous research, compelling storytelling, and a commitment to historical accuracy, we bring you the real stories of victims, investigators, and suspects, stories that demand to be heard. Each week, we take you deep into the world of true crime with a packed schedule of episodes. Tuesdays, historical true crime cases, exploring infamous and obscure crimes from history. Wednesdays, the Mick and Mac Mysteries, a thrilling fictional detective series set in 1950s Toronto. Thursdays, World Cold Case Thursday, investigating unsolved cases from around the globe. Sundays, Ontario Cold Cases, the latest episode uncovering an unsolved mystery from Ontario. From high-profile crimes that shock the nation to little-known cases waiting for justice, we uncover the truth, one case at a time. Join us as we explore the dark corners of history and mystery, where every clue could lead to answers and every case deserves a second look. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and never miss an episode of Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Missing in the Mariana Islands. In the quiet calm of a tropical morning, on a rural stretch of Saipan Island, two sisters made their usual walk through the village of Astau. It was May 25th, 2011. The air was warm, the sky clear, and the bus stop, a modest pavilion just a few hundred meters from their home, waited silently at the roadside. Faloma Luhk, 10 years old, and her 9-year-old sister, Maleina Luhk, sat down and waited for their school bus. They were seen there alone. 20 minutes later, the bus pulled up. But the girls were gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no dropped backpack or hair tie. Just an empty bench, the growing dread of something unthinkable. Faloma had been born on February 9th, 2001, in Astau, a village tucked in the lush landscape of Saipan, part of the remote Northern Mariana Islands. Her younger sister, Maleina, came into the world just over a year later, on February 13th, 2002. Their father, once a police officer, had left the islands behind to work in Micronesia and had drifted out of regular contact. Their mother lived and worked in Guam before eventually moving to the mainland United States. Though separated from their parents, the girls weren't unloved or forgotten. Since 2007, they'd been raised by their grandparents, surrounded by the warmth and protection of extended family, uncles, aunts, cousins, who all took part in their upbringing. School, which they attended in a neighboring town, was a place they thrived. Both sisters were bright, well-liked, and quick to make friends. But that ordinary Wednesday morning, just another day in their island routine, became the last time anyone ever saw them. Faloma and Maleina vanished without a trace. Where have they gone? By 3:30 p.m., school was out. The afternoon sun bathed the village of Aztao in golden light. Faloma and Maleina should have been walking through the door any minute. After all, the bus stop was just a short stroll from their home. But the minutes passed, and an hour, and still nothing. Their grandparents felt the first prickles of unease grow into a full-blown alarm. Something was wrong. Acting fast, they managed to intercept the school bus before it got too far down the road, waving it down with desperation in their eyes. When they asked the driver if he'd seen the girls that morning, he hesitated. He couldn't remember if they'd boarded at all. A chilling wave passed through them. Then came the real gut punch. Every child still on the bus confirmed the same thing. Not one of them had seen Faloma or Maleina all day. The grandparents raced home, hearts pounding, and immediately called the school. The answer was devastating. Neither of the sisters had shown up for a single class. They had arrived at the bus stop at 6:10 a.m. School ended at 3:30 p.m. And in all that time, over 10 hours, not a single person had raised an alarm. No one from the school called home to check. No one had noticed they were missing. It was only now, late in the afternoon, that their disappearance was finally recognized. By the time the search began, Faloma and Maleina Luhk had already been missing for nearly half a day. Up next, the investigation and search. The investigation and search. The moment the call with the school ended, the family didn't hesitate. They raced straight to the police station, desperation and fear tightening with every second. Fortunately, the local authorities didn't waste a moment. From the very start, they treated the case with the urgency it demanded. An island-wide alert was issued almost immediately. Flyers with the girls' faces were printed and plastered across Saipan. Family members canvassed the area, handing them out to neighbors and strangers alike, stopping people at the bustling Thursday market, begging for anyone to come forward with even the slightest clue. When that yielded nothing, they went bigger. Banners were strung above busy roadways impossible to ignore. The girls' faces now hung over intersections like watchful ghosts, silently pleading for answers. Police scoured every possible lead. They read through Faloma's school journal, hoping for even a hint, but it held nothing. Just the musings of a young girl. Maleina's journal was nowhere to be found. That absence echoed louder than anything written. Officers were dispatched to the bus stop where it all began. The pavilion was undisturbed, eerily ordinary. No signs of a struggle, no discarded belongings, no footprints veering into the jungle, no trail of two girls running away. Nothing. It was as though they had been swallowed whole by the island itself. Still, police followed their instincts. This wasn't a case of wandering off or hiding. Something darker had happened. They were convinced it was an abduction. Investigators gathered every detail they could. Faloma had been wearing jeans and a white blouse. Maleina wore jeans and a light green shirt with a butterfly design. Both had their backpacks. Faloma's was dark purple with Quituga Look printed on the straps, and Maleina's was Dora the Explorer themed, complete with her name and home phone number clearly written. It should have made them easier to find. Faloma stood 5 feet 1 inches tall and weighed 90 pounds. Maleina was smaller, 4 feet tall and 65 pounds, with a distinctive birthmark on her left cheek, an identifying feature that might have helped spot her. Police interviewed every child who rode the school bus that morning. One fact emerged again and again. When the bus pulled up at 6:30 a.m., Faloma and Maleina were not there. They were last seen at 6:10 a.m., sitting on a cement slab at the bus stop, waiting just like any other day. Whatever happened in those 20 minutes. Should have been a narrow enough window, but the thick vegetation surrounding the area may have shielded any sounds or movements from nearby houses. Nature, in this case, was not an ally. It was a curtain. In a final push, local police turned their attention to the landfill, suspecting the worst. Their small department didn't have the resources or manpower to fully dig through the massive, hazardous terrain. That line of inquiry, like so many others, hit a wall. And still, the question haunted the island. Where did the girls go in those 20 minutes? Help is called in. The Northern Mariana Islands may not be a U.S. state, but as a Commonwealth territory, they had something just as powerful: direct access to the full force of the United States federal government. And after nearly 2 days of searching with no sign, no clue, and no trace, local authorities knew they needed backup. On May 27th, just 1 day after realizing how little they had to go on, they made the call, and Washington answered. Within hours, the island's quiet rhythms were broken by the arrival of seasoned federal agents. The FBI touched down first, followed closely by officers from U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the U.S. Marshals Service. Soon, specialists from Homeland Security and the Drug Enforcement Administration joined the hunt. With the full weight of 3 major federal agencies behind them, the search exploded in scale. No expense was spared. Investigators fanned out across Saipan, joined by a staggering 500 volunteers. Locals who combed beaches, cliffsides, caves, and backroads with a desperation only community in crisis can muster. Underwater divers swept the reefs and coves that rimmed the island like a jagged crown. Above, skies thundered with the arrival of a U.S. Navy helicopter and a hulking C-130 plane from the U.S. Air Force, scanning the island's dense jungle canopy from above, an eye in the sky that never blinked. And deep within those jungles, help came on 4 legs. A highly trained tracking dog, brought in all the way from Hawaii, was deployed, specially conditioned to navigate thick, tangled terrain where human searchers struggled. So vital was the dog's role that local authorities waived their usual quarantine protocols just to get it on the ground faster. The island was no longer just a Pacific paradise. It had become the epicenter of a massive, multi-agency manhunt. And yet, despite all the boots on the ground, eyes in the air, and fins in the water, Faloma and Maleina Luhk were still missing. Up next, the search continues. The search continues. When it comes to missing children, investigators know one hard truth: you start close to home. And so the spotlight turned to Faloma and Maleina's biological parents. Their mother was quickly ruled out. She hadn't even been on Saipan. She was living and working in Guam, flew back to the island the moment she heard the devastating news. The trail to their father, who was living in Pohnpei, Micronesia, was longer, But the FBI didn't hesitate. They dispatched an agent from Hawaii to track him down and question him in person. Days later, the agent returned. The father, too, was cleared. With no family suspects, the investigation widened. Bulletins went beyond Saipan. Warnings, posters, and missing person reports flooded other islands in the Pacific, Guam, Hawaii, even reached as far as Washington State and Oregon. No distance was too far. No lead too small. More than 400 distinct locations were searched across Saipan, not just once, but twice. Investigators chased down over 100 leads, combed through abandoned buildings and derelict homes, even obtained permission to search private residences. No locked doors stayed locked. No shadowed corner unchecked. Then came one of the most harrowing efforts of all. On June 8th, federal agents turned their attention to the northern tip of the island, to the Marpi landfill. The FBI, local police, and firefighters, over 62 personnel in all, began the grueling task of excavating tons of rotting waste under the unforgiving sun. For days they sifted through garbage with bare determination, hoping to find anything that could point to the girls. They moved over 30,000 cubic feet of refuse, but in the end, they found nothing. The search of the landfill was officially called off on June 11th. And yet, there was a silver lining. The FBI didn't see it as a dead end. On the contrary, lack of evidence of the landfill gave them hope. They believe it supported a powerful possibility that the girls were still alive. By the time the dust settled and the last search party stood down, the hunt for Faloma and Maleina Luhk had become the largest, most expensive, and most extensive missing persons investigation in the history of the Northern Mariana Islands. But for all the manpower, all the leads, and all the ground covered, questions still echoed through the island like a ghost in the wind. Where were they? Witness accounts. Amid the mounting pressure and growing mystery, there was still hope. Someone out there had to have seen something. Investigators turned their attention to the men who passed the bus stop every week like clockwork, the garbage men. Every Wednesday morning, their trucks rolled through as Tau, and May 25, 2011, the day Faloma and Maleina vanished, was no exception. That morning, they stopped by the pavilion at precisely 5:45 a.m. The sisters weren't there yet. That didn't mean the workers had nothing to offer. In fact, they had something chilling. On 2 previous Wednesdays, May 11th, May 18th, they'd spotted the same gray Nissan pickup truck lurking in the area. On May 11th, the truck was parked directly in front of the Santa Lourdes Shrine, just a stone's throw from the bus stop. Its headlights were on, engine idling. Wasn't moving. Wasn't delivering, it was just waiting. A week later, on May 18th, they saw it again, this time driving toward the pavilion. At the time, the garbage men dismissed it. Probably just a local. But with hindsight, it felt different. Ominous. Police followed the lead, questioning other garbage crews to see if this gray Nissan had been spotted elsewhere around the island. Nothing. Only the Wednesday team had seen it. After the girls vanished, those same garbage men began scanning every alley and roadside during their routes, searching for anything, any clue that might lead to Faloma and Maleina. Then the shrine near the bus stop came back into focus. Another witness came forward with a strange encounter that had taken place weeks earlier, on May 6. That day, a man sat parked in front of the Santa Lourdes Shrine in a beat-up white 4-door car, with heavily tinted windows and damage to the front driver's side. He was unfamiliar, out of place. When locals approached him to ask what he was doing, he replied that he was waiting for someone. Then, without another word, he sped off. He was described as a Pacific Islander in his 30s, short hair, and a faint birthmark on his cheek. A composite sketch was quickly drawn and released to the press. 2 months later, in July, police tracked the man down. When questioned, he repeated the same line: he had simply been waiting for someone. Was it a coincidence, a red herring, or something far more sinister? No one could say for sure, but what was once just a quiet roadside shrine had now become a focal point of suspicion. And that gray truck? Still unaccounted for. Up next, remains are found, but are they the girls? Remains are found, but are they the girls? On August 14th, nearly 3 months after Faloma and Maleina vanished, a gruesome discovery rocked the island. A dog trotted home through the heat of the Saipan sun, nothing unusual, till it arrived in its owner's backyard, proudly carrying something in its mouth. It was a human leg bone. Alarmed, the owners followed the dog back to where it had come from, a vacant lot in Kagman, beside a weather-beaten, abandoned shack. What they found there was chilling. Human remains, scattered and sun-bleached, with some pieces still bearing remnants of flesh. The bones, it was estimated, had been lying there for 3 to 4 weeks. The scene was grim, silent testimony to a lonely death. Also discovered nearby were fragments of clothing, including a pair of young girls' underwear. Immediately, dread swept across the island. Had Faloma and Maleina finally been found? The size of the clothing didn't quite match. It was too large, too weathered. Investigators believed its presence was coincidental, likely unrelated. But the fear gripped tighter. The bones had been severed, but the damage was attributed to animals dragging the remains, not violence. There were no signs of burial. For a few agonizing days, the island braced for the worst. Then came the truth. A dental examination of the jawbone revealed that the remains belonged not to a child, but to an elderly male, approximately 70 years old. DNA testing confirmed the identity. 72-year-old Ricardo Muna Kutaiga, Faloma and Maleina's great-granduncle. Ricardo had vanished weeks earlier after failing to return from a routine walk. He was a quiet man, a loner by nature, who lived alone and followed a simple daily ritual. He'd stroll from his home to the CYC store to buy a newspaper, then head to Lau Beach, where he'd sit beneath a tree to read, before walking back again. He was last seen alive 2 weeks before his remains were found. Later, his ID card was discovered near the site, confirming beyond doubt that this was Ricardo. But his death raised new questions. Police never officially stated his cause of death, and his family, they weren't convinced it was natural. Ricardo being healthy, strong for his age. The idea that he had simply collapsed and died didn't sit right. Some believed he may have been attacked, possibly for the $674 pension he received each month. While the fine brought closure for one family, it brought no answers for another. Faloma and Maleina were still missing. And now there were whispers that something even darker might be haunting Saipan shores. A suspect. As weeks turned into months and hope began to dim, suspicion crept closer to home. The next person of interest wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows, but a familiar face within the community. Alan Santos Aguan, a local firefighter, connected to the girl's family through marriage. Suddenly, very reluctant to cooperate. When investigators approached him, Alan refused to take a polygraph test. That alone wasn't damning, Polygraphs are notoriously unreliable, and refusing one isn't a crime. But it was what he did after the interview that raised eyebrows. He sold his 2003 Toyota Camry. He resigned from the fire department, and then he left. Alan Agwan picked up and moved to Washington State, claiming he wanted to reunite with his family. It was a valid reason, but the timing, it sent up flares. Investigators searched the car before he sold it. No trace evidence, no suspicious cleaning, nothing to tie him to the girls. And without hard evidence, they had no grounds to charge him. It was the last solid lead they had. And then, nothing. The case began to cool. The island that once buzzed with search parties and federal agents slowly fell silent. The trail had gone cold, and the official search was called off. Alan Agwan might have quietly disappeared from public scrutiny, if not for what happened next. On May 8th, 2012, nearly a year after the girls vanished, Agwan was arrested in King County, Washington. The charges were shocking. He had assaulted his wife and their child, the very family he claimed to have moved to be with, attacking them with a chair in a fit of violence. He was thrown into jail, hit with domestic violence and felony assault charges. His bail was set at a staggering $500,000. A no-contract order was issued, but Agwan violated it multiple times, leading to further charges. Despite his arrest and troubling behavior, Alan Agwan has never been charged with anything related to the disappearance of Faloma and Maleina. But the shadow he cast lingered. In 2014, a flicker of hope emerged. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released age-progressed images of the sisters, offering a haunting glimpse of what Faloma and Maleina might look like as teenagers. The images were circulated across Saipan, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington State. And then came the photo. A CCTV camera at a grocery store in Saipan captured a girl, one who bore an eerie resemblance to one of the missing sisters. For a brief moment, hearts raced. Could it be? But once again, hopes were dashed. The girl was found. She was not Faloma. She was not Maleina. And the mystery continued. Another suspect. Years passed. The trail had long gone cold, but in February 2018, the FBI uncovered a new and chilling lead. This time their sights fell on a man with a dark past and a name already whispered with fear on the island. Joseph Acosta Crisostomo. A convicted killer, a predator, a man serving a life sentence for a brutal crime that shocked the Northern Mariana Islands. In 2012, Joseph lured a Filipino bartender into his car by posing as a taxi she had called. She never made it home. Her body was later discovered in the filthy bathroom of a long-abandoned shopping mall. That crime alone sealed his fate, but his record didn't end there. He was also the prime suspect in two unsolved murders of Chinese shopkeepers from 1995 and another horrifying case from 2006. A Chinese woman whose body washed up on a beach. Witnesses had last seen her climbing into a taxi, one that, like in the bartender's case, turned out to be fraudulent. Now the FBI wondered, could he be connected to Faloma and Maleina? There was one link that caught their attention. Joseph's family owned a property in Koblerville, a small, quiet village on Saipan's southern tip. Agents suspected the girls might have been buried there. It was a long shot, but it was one worth taking. A judge agreed. The suspicions were serious enough for a warrant to be signed. On February 17th, 2018, FBI agents and local police descended on the property, tearing into the yard with a backhoe, searching for any trace of the missing sisters. They dug for hours. every shovelful of dirt brought new tension. But in the end, nothing. No bones, no clothing, no answers. Joseph's lawyer was quick to pounce. He reminded everyone that his client had been behind bars at the time of the girl's disappearance. In fact, Joseph hadn't been released until December 17th, 2011, months after Faloma and Maleina vanished. A solid alibi? Maybe. But the FBI had still seen enough to justify an excavation. Outraged by the search, Joseph's family launched legal action against the FBI, claiming they had gone too far. But the investigation forced the island to confront an unsettling truth. The man already linked to multiple killings had lived among them. Some still believed he might have known more than he ever let on. Once again, the girls weren't found. But the questions refused to stay buried. Up next, the last development. The last development. In early March 2018, nearly 7 years after Faloma and Maleina vanished, investigators launched one final, desperate dig. The location, a forgotten, overgrown lot in Cagman, where time had all but erased its former purpose. Buried beneath the weeds and rubble sat the rusting remains of a World War II-era septic tank. It hadn't been used in decades. But according to an anonymous tip, it was now serving a far darker purpose. The message was chillingly simple. The girls are buried there. Acting on the lead, police crews moved in. The ground was broken, the tank unearthed. For hours, investigators searched, probing, digging, hoping for closure, or bracing for the worst. But once again, nothing. No remains, no clothing, no answers. It was the last known development in the case. And yet, the file remains open. The investigation is still active. The FBI continues to pursue leads and is offering a $25,000 reward for any information that could finally solve the mystery. Anyone with information is urged to contact the FBI field office in the Northern Mariana Islands at 670-322-6934. As for Faloma and Maleina Luhk, they're still out there alive somewhere, hiding in the shadows of time and distance. They would be 24 and 23 years old today. The FBI and local police haven't given up hope. And neither should we. It's been more than a decade since Faloma and Maleina Luhk vanished from that quiet bus stop on Saipan Island. A simple morning routine shattered in 20 minutes. No one saw what happened. No one came forward. And still, no one knows why. But somewhere out there, someone does. If you have any information, no matter how small, you're urged to contact the FBI field office in the Northern Mariana Islands at 670-322-6934. A $25,000 reward is still being offered because justice doesn't expire, and neither does hope. I'm Jay Nickel, and this has been Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. If you found this episode compelling, moving, or important, please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps us continue to bring forgotten cases like this one back into the light. You can find Ontario Cold Cases wherever you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Substack, and more. And remember, sometimes the coldest cases are the ones that need us the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, never stop asking questions, because every case deserves answers. and every victim deserves justice.